I am delighted to be here again for the second Sasakawa Security Forum. I'm Sheila Smith. I'm the Senior Fellow for Japan Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. I asked Admiral Blair, I'm not an expert on defense technology transfer, and he says, you need to be educated, Sheila. So I am here to be educated, and I can't think of two colleagues that can educate me more effectively than who we have today. You have their bios, I believe, in your packet. So just very briefly, Pat Dewar is the Executive Vice President of Lockheed Martin and the Chairman of Lockheed Martin Global Incorporated. He's assumed this position in July of 2013, and if you read his bio, he has had extensive experience in many countries, but he now has responsibility for strategic planning for Lockheed Martin with over 70 countries and industrial partnerships. So I'm delighted, Pat, to see you again. Junichi Nishiyama also joins us here. It's interesting to me that we have two engineers. They seem to me by their bios to be experts in academics, but in fact they are practitioners and serious engineers. Mr. Nishiyama joined Mitsubishi Heavy Industries in 1971 and spent his career there working on missile system development, Patriot systems, and the BM Ballistic Missile Defense Development Program. And he was general manager of their guided weapons systems department from 1998. He retired from that position in 2011, so now he can talk about all kinds of things openly in forums like this. And he continues to be a very active participant in Japan's policy debate over defense technology development and transformation. So welcome, Nishiyama-san. We're delighted to have you with us. I apologize, just as a way of introducing, coming in halfway through the meeting today, I had the great privilege of sitting in the gallery this morning, listening to Prime Minister Abe address the United States Congress. And I don't often hang out in the gallery at joint sessions of the Congress, so I was very excited to be there. And all of the Japan hands were there to welcome the Prime Minister, but we had a full house on the floor. And it was astounding to me how strong of a welcome, not that I doubted that, but just to reassure you, he was a rounding success. It was an amazing speech. And he did, I think, a very good job of introducing himself as a person, sharing his experiences, his own way of thinking about problem solving. He did an excellent job on TPP, addressing, of course, an audience that has some differences of opinion about TPP. But he was very, very successful in articulating not only Japan's interests, but also in putting forward a vision for an alliance of hope, which I thought was a lovely way to think of this relationship. But we're going to shift to gears a little bit. We're going to talk, there's been so many changes in Japan and Japan's security planning. You've talked about them, I'm sure, already with your previous speakers. We're going to talk about an aspect that doesn't get a lot of attention, and in fact, I think maybe one of the more fundamental shifts in Japan, and that is the relaxation of constraints on the export and transfer of defense technology. It's a new area for Japan. And I'm sure in our conversation today, we'll hear a lot about the thinking, not only the Japanese side, but also from a US perspective as a partner of Japan in the joint development in many ways of significant weapons technologies and defense technologies, how this transformation may affect our bilateral relationship. So in the context of new guidelines, a new conversation within Japan about its constitution, a new institutional consolidation of strategic planning in the NSC, you now have this very new initiative that involves not only the government planners, but also corporate planners as well. Very critical to our alliance partnership. So let me stop there. We are going to have a full discussion, but first I'm going to invite Mr. Nishiyama to the stage to share with us his thinking about where this policy change in Japan is leading. Nishiyama-san, okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you very much inviting me for this. Thank you very much for Sasakawa Foundation giving me this great opportunity. And I'm very much honored to share my thought about the defense industry of Japan. And sorry, that's how.
There you go.
Okay. I would like to explain about Japan Defense Development Cooperation policies and opportunities. And first disclaimer, this is only my view. Please understand. And I will talk about the Japanese defense policy, defense equipment technology transfer, the new policy, and then summarize for the discussion. Sorry. Japan's security, this is just an overview of the Japan's security policy. In Japan, as you know, that the Prime Minister Abe formed the National Security Council in December 2013, and he would take responsibility to various national security issues, exercising a strong political leadership, I believe. And then we have a national security strategy that was also adopted in December 2013. And NSS is basic policy for national security, mainly about the diplomatic and defense measures for about next 10 years. This is the first security strategy we've discussed that we need a national strategy in many years, but this happened the first time. At the same time, we have National Defense Program guidelines and midterm defense program was determined based on this national security strategy. As you know that National Defense Program guidelines, NDPG, is a posture for Japan Defense Force for deployment target for major equipment for about next 10 years. And the midterm defense program is formulated to achieve the deployment target of the NDPG. It stipulates the total amount of defense expenditure and the quantities of major equipment to be deployed for the next 5 years. Then last year, new policy called 3 Principles on Transfer of Defense Equipment and Technology was decided in April. This would open the door for Japan to collaborate on defense equipment and technology with other countries. Then in July, Abe Cabinet reinterpreted Japan's constitution to allow to collaborate self-defense. Message here says, I think Japan's proactive contribution to peace based on the principles of international cooperation and collaboration in equipment and operation. And the strategy, I will talk about the new strategy for maintaining and strengthening defense production and technological basis, which was determined in June last year also. I will pick up some of the points relating to the international collaboration. In the this chart, a little bit busy chart, but in research and development area, I think that the use of the dual-use technology is important, and also this strategy suggests cooperation with overseas. That's stated. Implementation of defense equipment and technology cooperation, international joint development and production is also stated in this strategy. This is one message. And it defines the course of action for each area of the defense equipment. I'll pick up some of them. In the aircraft area, Japan will try to develop the next generation fighter aircraft. It also mentioned that to consider international co-development, but this is currently under research. And they also mentioned the participating F-35 ALGS. The Pat knows much better than I. Is also that would be also a good collaboration program, I believe. In the area of guided missiles, in addition to domestic development, international development is also considered. Other potential area would be cybersecurity and outer space collaboration. And then I'll talk about a little bit more about the new three principles of defense equipment transfer. This is a new principle for arms export control. Principle 1, that defines the cases of transfers prohibited, not to be permitted when it violates obligation under any treaty Japan has concluded under UNSC resolutions to a country involved in the conflict. This is a prohibition. But principle 2, this is really a new principle. It defines the cases transfers permitted. Previous principle was the only prohibition, but this allows as the transfer or export being allowed. This opened the door for us to collaborate with other countries. And principle 3 requires a limitation to the cases appropriate control ensured that will avoid the extra purpose use and transfer to third party. Information disclosure also required as an annual report to National Security Council and making it transparency. After this new principle been decided, and the Japanese industry participated that Euro Satellite exhibition in Paris in June last year. 13 companies participated. This was the first time Japanese companies displayed defense equipment in the defense and security-related foreign exhibition. But only they showed a scaled model, but this is the very, very first time. I believe this is a very important occasion. And to show in this exhibition, Ministry of Defense promoted to participate. However, after this exhibition, what I heard was some companies was asked to demonstrate a system, but they could not respond because there's no way to do. Nobody knows how to demonstrate the defense systems to the other country, because no rule was settled. Even that Japan Defense Force could not support that demonstration. Even I think that the principle allows, but we do not know how to do that. We do not know, or we do not have the rule. And the next, I will talk about the next experience is we had a seminar in October, Research Institute for Peace and Security held a seminar in October last year. Professor Murayama, Doshisha University, proposed 3 strategies. Strategy 1 is a so-called run-up strategy from the parts, component, then up to subsystem and system level. They gradually expand. Strategy 2, I call it the role share. That Japan has long experience, extensive experience in licensed production. And now that we are allowed to share the production, that being licensed to the international the production share being this strategy 2, what Professor Murayama suggested. And the strategy 3 is a system export. He suggested exporting from so-called defensive systems. The examples are anti-terrorism system, infections, disease, and missile defense. This is his suggestion. Then we had a panel discussion and discussed extensively. There were several key findings. I'll pick a couple of them. Because Japan makes good quality products, that we have a good chance to export to the other countries. That is one of the panelists said. And but to make this happen, we have to create a good track record of government industry corporations. That is what we've discussed in this seminar. And then, just after this seminar held, the NHK took arms export as a documentary program. Defense equipment transfer will be an issue for security dialogue that Mr. Hochi of MOD mentioned, and the Kevin Mayer said that the U.S. welcomed that the changes defense equipment transfer and also the collective defense policy. Then, in this program, however, industry opinion been also taken, and there's the opinion industry is reluctant for export and international collaboration. Industry said that if inquiry comes from the overseas, they may not positively respond because industry does not know that would be approved by the government or not, and it will be difficult to assess the exporting risk of the defense equipment also. And in addition to that, Japanese industry is very much concerning its reputation. That's been broadcasted in this program. And next chart shows that the 4 cases, international cooperation derived by Keidanren and American Chamber of Commerce in Japan. And this 4 cases shows that the first case is government-to-government international cooperation. This example is US-Japan BMD program. B is industry research program, and this is case B is a basic research case, and case C would be the Japanese industry export to the this chart shows the U.S. industry, the subcontract from the U.S. industry or U.S. government directly. And the case D is licensed production case. So we had 2 experience, case A and case D, but we don't have that experience of the case B and C. And the after this principle being changed, and the based on these 4 cases, this chart shows that the currently activities are allocated, which is the which UK, sorry, SM3 or UK, Japan, France, Japan, and Germany, Japan. These government agreed or started to dialogue. This is a case B, case A, sorry. And the case, another case A would be the US-2 flying boat or the submarine discussion with the Australia. That would be a case A. And the case D, the bottom column shows that the licensed production case, Patriot Pact Seeker Gyro be allowed to export to the United States. Next chart shows the industry corporate R&D. This case not happened yet, and case C would be the direct contract from a foreign government or company. And the other case that is not been stated in the new policy, investment to the other companies, making a joint venture or invest to the company in the foreign country. This would be a next step. As a summary, I would like to summarize that we do not have an experience for arms export. Even that the Shosha trading company has a good experience to import, but never had the experience. So that when I talked to someone back in Japan, talking with the trading company people, you have to learn how to export. We have to know the regulation in the foreign countries, even including the U.S. And we also need to find the requirement from the foreign countries, what foreign countries really want from Japan. Nobody in Japan ever tried to find out. We do not have that kind of export or organization. In Japan, we need arms export guidelines, how arms to be approved in Japan. Japan needs to clarify the regulatory process of approval. That process and the procedure will be visualized to the industry. We need that. The example may be US ITAR, but when talked with my American friend, that is too much complicated. So we need much simpler regulations. Japanese government will establish, that the Defense Equipment Agency in the autumn, maybe in October timeframe. We expect this new agency would promote export and the cooperation for defense equipment and technology. I believe that the opportunity exists for Japan. A system level, aircraft, ship, submarine, tank, missile, radar, communication systems. Many opportunities. Export of the components, parts, and material will be another opportunity. And I think that the exporting licensed product as a first step, that is very much realistic. In addition to that, space area, we have the COSY satellite system, the GPS and QZSS collaboration is as a complementary system. That would be a good cooperative program, I think, and space situational awareness to track space debris, and maritime domain awareness to track surface vessels, and that will be an area of the collaboration. And also cyber security would be another cooperative area. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Nishiyama-san. That was a smorgasbord of I mean, it's a very complex conversation you're having today within Japan about the varieties of options that this new policy affords you. You know, the United States and Japan, as you point out, have had a long history in licensed production and joint research and development, but now Japan is looking at this new arena of defense exports, which is a new step for you. But let's stay with the U.S.-Japan relationship, and Pat, I'd like to invite you to join us here to help us understand a little bit your perspective on the new partnership opportunities for the U.S. and Japan.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Before I begin, I would like to express my appreciation to the Foundation and to you, Admiral Blair, for organizing this event and, more importantly, for inviting me. I have a personal connection, and earlier we were talking about maybe feeling old. So over 40 years ago, as a teenager, I lived in Sagamihara, where my father worked in Camp Zama. And it has been basically a relationship that I've been really happy to maintain over these last 40-some years. I never thought I'd say, 40-some years, because I still feel like I'm 29 years old. But be that as it may, it really was 1973, 4, and 5. Much of what I will say here in prepared remarks, so I apologize in advance if we duplicate, but really they've been kind of teed up by Nishiyama-san, and much of what we said today, hopefully they'll set the stage for the question and answer period, which I'm also looking forward to. So Japan is going through a paradigm shift in a way that engages its defense trade. For decades, Japanese industry has focused primarily, though not exclusively, on a one-way trade with the United States. Japan has relied on a combination of foreign military sales, direct commercial sales, licensed co-production, as we just talked about, and indigenous development to equip its forces. Japanese companies have had only one customer for defense sales. They have little or no experience dealing with the acquisition agencies nor armament directors of foreign countries. And they have yet to experience the need for offsets or industrial participation and other aspects of technology transfer, and all that is now changing. So there's two major developments I wanted to highlight about these changes. Much of the focus on defense trade is rightly on the lifting of the three no-export principles. Japanese companies are once again under specific guidelines in a position to start marketing defense articles to other countries besides the United States, to be part of the global supply chain, and Nishiyama-san mentioned the F-35 ALGS, that's Autonomic Logistics Systems. And if I just would go off Mark's remarks for a bit, so you think about it, if you're in the F-35 supply chain and you make something, doesn't matter what, an aft, a wing, even a small component, your component or your piece will go in every F-35 made, assuming that you're on the A model, the B model, and the C model, regardless of what country it goes to. That's the model of the F-35. It's not a country-specific industrial participation model. That is not how it was formed. So that's different. And I believe F-35 was the program that forced some of the change in the allowing the componentry, if you will, for Japanese industry to be part of the global supply chain. So again, this change will promote a much higher emphasis. So the second change in the decision is allow the right of collective self-defense and the operationalization of that decision in the revision of the U.S.-Japan Defense Guidelines, which we also talked a lot about today. This change, though, is going to promote a much higher emphasis on interoperability, which we talked about and Admiral Harris mentioned, as Japan seeks to make its platforms and its systems more compatible. This will, in turn, put a higher premium on effective cybersecurity as well, again, another aspect that we alluded to, as well as the changes in traditional defense. There are, however, significant challenges, which I hope that we get to in the questions, but creating a new regulatory framework for defense trade in a country that has not had appreciable trade in defense is a major challenge. And I don't advocate taking the ITAR for word and putting it in Japanese. Big mistake. But for Japanese companies unaccustomed to challenges of the global defense marketplace, this is going to be new and it's going to be somewhat intimidating. U.S. defense companies, with their decades-long partnerships with Japanese companies and a broad and deep exposure to the international marketplace, I think are uniquely positioned to help Japanese companies navigate this new environment. So a couple of key points I'd like to make, and hopefully I'm speaking as an industry representative of aerospace and defense, less exactly from a Lockheed Martin perspective, although some of that may come through, and for that I apologize. Hopefully it'll be illuminating. But 4 key developments that we're watching. Obviously we're watching the new, although modest upward trend of defense budgets in Japan. the lifting of the 3 Ps, the reinterpretation of the Japanese Constitution that allows the right of collective self-defense, and the creation of a new unified defense acquisition agency, which was alluded to, that will also manage defense exports. So if I start talking about the defense budget, in 2012, we saw the first real increase in Japan's defense budget in a decade. It was a modest 0.8%, but it did reverse a long trend. The years since have seen slightly larger increases in defense, but for Japan's fiscal situation and major social spending requirements, they don't permit double-digit growth in defense spending. Thus, our customer is determined to get more value from its existing budget, another situation which, again, I think is new for Japan. Increasingly, we expect and will need to expect far greater emphasis on affordability and performance than we have actually seen in the past. The changes in the export guidelines, of course, in 2014, the Japanese government effectively limited the ban on exporting defense items, a policy that had been in place since 1967. The government, like that of the United States, will still exercise significant control over those exports, but where they were totally banned in the past, they are now actively being encouraged, which is, again, unique. This is a major paradigm shift for Japanese industry, and many are turning to companies like Lockheed Martin and others for guidance and partnership. U.S. defense companies are uniquely positioned to partner with Japanese defense primes, as we have in the past for Japanese products, but now for the international marketplace. And we're also partnering with those companies that want to enter the supply chain side of the marketplace. So essentially think about second and third tier Japanese companies that can provide capability which in the past we would never normally have dealings with. So our long partnership with the Japanese primes, coupled with our extensive knowledge of the global market space, make it ideal. Perhaps it's even more so in the area of trinational and multinational cooperation. The old co-development models tended to be top-down, government to government, and they were somewhat bureaucratic. The newer models can be bottom-up, company to company with government oversight, but potentially more innovation. And if you think about the potential Japanese submarine design to Australia with an American combat system, you can talk about a brand new way to go to market than we've ever done in the past, with a different set of relationships, a different set of constraints, and obviously a different set of regulations that will overlay that. So let's talk about collective self-defense. Also in 2014, the Japanese cabinet approved a long-standing reinterpretation of the Japanese Constitution to allow for the right of collective self-defense. This reinterpretation will be codified by legislation due to be introduced in the Diet in May of this year. This decision will also be reflected in a major revision of the U.S.-Japan defense guidelines that have been formalized just this week, and we've talked a lot about. All of this will fundamentally alter the way Japanese military operates, both as the U.S. ally and as regional players. It also means that Japan will start looking for new and different types of capabilities than it has in the past, and it will put a great premium on the ability to operate closely with its U.S. forces through interoperability and other military partners. So the Defense Acquisition Agency, again, at the end of this year, the Japanese government will create a new agency within the Ministry of Defense that is tasked to focus on defense acquisition with the additional responsibility of promoting exports in defense. This will be another change in the way defense businesses are conducted in Tokyo. It is a change that Lockheed Martin will monitor closely as part of our key strategy. We are all watching the formation of the new agency within the MOD, and depending on its precise structure and mission, it could become a major force multiplier for Japanese entry into the global defense marketplace. The government of Japan has grown to become one of the largest international customers, and our partnerships with Japanese industries have become extremely important to our continued business success. In fact, we have close partnerships with almost all the major defense primes. With the radical change in Japan's defense needs and objectives, we now face a period of challenge, but also of opportunity, and we'll seek to understand these opportunities. From cars to computers, space systems to medical devices, the U.S. and Japanese economies are inextricably linked, trading more than $290 billion each year in goods and services. This shared economy and future growth of our two countries is propelled by sharing ideas, knowledge, and technology. Both of our countries recognize the importance of investing in our people to ensure we have the leaders and innovators who will power our shared growth and prosperity for the next generation. One of the ways Lockheed Martin is looking to build that human capital is our work with the Bridging Foundation, as an example, an organization that looks to strengthen U.S.-Japanese relations by providing scholarships for American undergraduate students to study in Japan. Exchanges like these are the foundation of our shared growth. They underline the fact that alliances do not simply exist on paper, they live in the hearts of our people. And as allies and friends, it's crucial that we give our citizens the chance to get to know each other, collaborate with each other, and learn from each other. In the years ahead, we will need sustainable solutions more than ever, and we will need the best minds from both our countries and indeed around the world to meet this critical moment and build a more sustainable future. Security, growth, sustainability, each pillar presents an imperative for the United States and Japan. They each present their own challenges and obstacles, and still, they bring amazing prospects for stronger collaboration and partnership between our nations. So changes in the defense policy of Japan, export policy, and changes in the defense acquisition offer both significant challenges and opportunities. And as Japan's role in defense and security evolves, and as Japanese industry evolves, U.S. industry, and in particular Lockheed Martin, look to help where we're needed. We look to grow with our Japanese industrial partners, and we look to continued development of the human resources that both enhance the Japan-U.S. security partnership, as well as strengthen our economies and our industrial relationships. So again, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'm looking forward to our dialogue.
Thank you both for excellent presentations and giving us a lot to digest. And I thought maybe we would start thinking about, we can talk about this as government policy. We introduced this as one of the components of the transformation in our security alliance and in Japan's security policy. So let's stay with the government side of things, policy side of things for a second. But then I'd like to ask you also about where it fits in terms of your commercial, the set of commercial interests that both of you alluded to. So this is a new endeavor for Japan, but we also have some lessons learned, I believe, in terms of the way we've been working together on programs already. And I wonder if, just for the audience, if you could share with us a little bit of your sense of, for example, ballistic missile defense, or we could include the F-35 conversation if you'd like, but help us understand what we've learned, because as we attempt to pivot forward, excuse the word, we need to understand what it is both sides are coming at this relationship with in terms of their understanding. So in terms of how we've understood the benefits of defense cooperation between the United States and Japan, what has ballistic missile defense taught us? What have we learned?
But I've worked for the ballistic missile collaboration or cooperation for SM-3 development. But this would be government program. And I'd say that let me go back to the category or cases of the co-development. The first case is F2, but we call it international cooperative development. However, this is a Japanese program. From the U.S. side, I understand that is the F-16 licensed program, and the Japanese unique requirement being applied, and they only be used in Japan. That is what we call it a cooperation program. And the BMD is the U.S.-Japan cooperative program. However, this is a U.S. government contract with Raytheon, Japanese government contract with Mitsubishi Heavy. That's the two separate contracts. It's not kind of a consortium type of the program. The other example may be F-35. You can explain a little better. But the U.S. the 80% and the other 8 countries. But the Eurofighter is 4 countries making a consortium, so that there are several cases of the cooperation program. And our experience is F2 and the BMD, and I do not think so-called really cooperative program yet. So now that the reluctance or lifted the ban of this arms export control, we are allowed to participate in F-35 cases or Eurofighter type of the scheme. That is my understanding.
So it transforms it completely for Japan in terms of your outlook, right? Pat, would you like to comment a bit?
Sure. I mean, if you kind of take a step back and try to understand how well we know each other, it's different, I think, between the U.S. and Japan aerospace and defense industry than any other country. I mean, and probably because of where we were before the governmental changes. That, you know, as Nishiyama said, they have, you know, worked on Standard Missile. F2 was the F-16 derivative, but it was a very close cooperation with our company in this case. The PAC-3 missile is actually, there's only one other production facility outside the United States. It's in Nagoya. And there's many other examples. And in every one of those examples, we knew each other very well. It's true, the contract structure was different than if you were in a competitive teaming arrangement and you were marketing it to another country or another market. So that is what will be different. It is, we don't have that expertise, but unlike, I mean, we have partnerships in the aerospace and defense industry with all of the primes. You know, I mean, whether it's Lockheed and Boeing working on, you know, the new competitive stuff, or Lockheed and Raytheon on THAAD, and you name it, you can keep on going. You can touch them all. Everybody is together in one form or another. But we don't know each other in, you know, organizationally like we know the Japanese industry. So I think that's a contextual element that I think we should consider. We will certainly walk new ground together. We referred to the Australian submarine program. I don't know if it was alluded to, but just touched about. I mean, if Vietnam does enhance its maritime domain awareness capability, it's as likely as not it could be with Japanese P-3s that have potentially either, you know, gone through a U.S. company to mill, however that goes. I mean, there are opportunities out there, but the very first one, we will walk brand new ground. I just think the fact that we know each other so well and we've been working with each other for so long is actually going to be foundational. So.
You know, both of you referenced another piece of the puzzle for both of our countries, right? Which is that we have limited defense budgets. You know, we have to now work in a different environment, collectively and independently. Could you speak a little bit, Nishiyama-san, to the budgetary impact of this policy change? How will this affect the way that your defense industry is going to interact? You know, Pat alluded to the new acquisitions agency that's coming. Maybe you have some insights on that, but what does this do for your budgetary planning and your commercial interaction with the ministry?
It is very difficult question.
Sorry.
That when this arms export control policy principle been changed, or before that we've discussed that the changing this policy may allow the Japanese industry more opportunity and maybe making the quantity of the products been double or tripled, and then that the Japanese Defense Force may have a benefit the cost down. But that depends on the size of the product. I mean, if components, well, I take an example that if component we make this small component for Japan that only 100, if it's allowed to export, maybe 1,000, that 10 times. But as a system, that aircraft or submarine, but won't make it 10 times, maybe double, or 50% maybe add additional 50%. Like that cost won't be changed so much, so that it depends on the size of the manufacturing. And to the system level, I do not think that much impact. So that but we have to try try to export, then we will know as a lesson learned. But it was very difficult to see.
But there is a bit of an economies of scale motivation, obviously, here. Pat, you mentioned in your remarks interoperability, which I think is a fundamentally important part of what this is going to do for the Alliance. Can you speak a little bit more about where you see the opportunities in particular for enhanced interoperability?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it is going to come from the new systems that get deployed, but if you think about, I mean, F-35 alone could create a fifth generation environment around it, ISR, EW, communications, basically how you fight, how the services fight together, how governments will operate together. So I think it'll be the interoperability that I was referring to is essentially now when you have combined coalition operations with the equipment that is supplied and you deploy together and outside of kind of the local area. I mean, that changes things. I think you'll see, it'll get more ISR related communications, basic command and control structures. That's what I foresee as potential, at least the discussions about how we would support that. And almost in every one of those cases, industry and military are kind of inextricably linked. So that's where my remarks were aimed.
Yes,
I would like to add that because they are talking about the F-35 that is coming.
Yes.
But the current system also been have a merit that we can share the parts or component for the P-3C, 15, or Patriot, PAC-3, and that not been allowed until last year. But now we could share that to support the interoperability and the more maintenance. Logistic support.
You hear a lot about maintenance, right? You hear a lot about access to maintenance and shared conversations about that. So moving beyond what we already do, what about cyber and space? Again, both of you alluded to it, but I wonder if you could get a little bit more specific about where you see the opportunities there. Let's maybe start with cyber.
Cyber area, I'm sorry, I do not know much about that.
Yeah. But go ahead.
I'll try to frame it, and Admiral Harris stayed away from it from a classified perspective. I'll try to frame it from our perspective. So, when you are working with partners industrially, and their systems have to be as good as your systems. That's one thing. If you just think about the development data, I mean, truth be told, the autonomic logistics systems, again, it was alluded to. It's all of the health and welfare as well as system checks, if you will, for the F-35. Well, I mean, that's all electronic data. Right. So essentially, the cyber capabilities there. If you just think about one system as an example, they're all that way. And I think now, when you interoperate, when you have a company that enters your supply chain and your supply chain has to be hardened, just from an industrial perspective, that's a new element for us. And so there we will share that risk, we will share that threat, and we'll have to share that solution going forward. And then, obviously, I think the rest is...
Yeah, we'll leave the rest where it belongs. I do think that we need a little bit more. You shared with us, Nishiyama-san, a little bit of your sense of how Japanese defense commercial companies would evolve given this, right? Given the new defense technology cooperation initiatives. But we understand your defense industry to be large major corporations that have a certain percentage of their business in defense, right? We think of our defense industry as somewhat organized somewhat differently. Can you help us understand what you think this could do, or what's the potential that we might see for a little transformation in the way your industry organizes itself? Is it going to be fairly similar, or do you see some new opportunities there?
The first that we have to understand that the percentage of the revenue in the Japanese industry, that MHI, KHI, that the so-called heavy industry, that the defense revenue will be something around 10% of the company. And the electronic manufacturers, Mitsubishi Electric, NEC, and Toshiba, 2 to 3%. So that the compare with the U.S. industry like Lockheed Martin, not Boeing, but Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, 70, 80, 90% of the defense. So that our mindset of the other company is different. So then that what I mentioned, that the reputation of the company and company management may not really to advertise the export of the defense system. That has to be changed, but I do not know that how to make it change. That is difficult, but that is a hidden barrier in our mind.
Yeah. So you think that there's still a certain sense of caution on the part of your major industries involved in defense technologies?
Yes.
And what do you think are the factors that will help minimize that caution? Where do you see?
I think the showing and the participating to the Eurosatory, like that, and this year that the DSEI will be held in London. Then that the media counts and the broadcast of all the Japanese industry starting the arms export. But that has to be known by the public.
Right.
And the public, my view is supportive. But the media, some of those small number of people make it loud to against that. But the public is much supportive, I believe.
So we haven't talked about innovation. We've talked about a lot of policy goals, and we haven't really talked about what I presume corporations think about a lot, which is what does this do to the dynamics of innovation and technology? Not just technology transfer, but how do we build new technologies together? Do either of you want to speak to that a little bit?
In Japan, that Ministry of Defense, the new budget, that is the so-called defense research funding, and that is a small amount of the budget. That this is quite new in the MOD trying to invest all those funding to the academia, and there's still a mindset program of the academia, but we are trying to make that happen like a DARPA system, or with the the tier level technology readiness level, 1 to 3 will be basic research level. That will be now that MOD trying to invest, and that will be the starting point for make innovation. And that area maybe possibly cooperate with the overseas, but that the process of regulation not been cleared yet.
Yeah, so this might be one of the harder points, because the bottom line is in the global marketplace, if you see it that way, kind of take North Korea, China, and Japan, and Russia out. There are best athletes of certain things, and we find ourselves. I'll just speak from Lockheed Martin, but I'm confident, whether it's Boeing, Defense, Northrop, or Raytheon, they could have the same story. But I mean, we have suppliers, but also kind of key partners in all of our systems, and we've been using them. We've been tied together for years. So the key about innovation will be what are those nuggets? What are the golden nuggets that Japanese industry has that they are either best athlete or can become best athlete in whatever it is, radar system, a ship-based system, and those. I mean, you have to find where it's win-win. Because if it's not win-win, if it's somebody trying to keep or prop somebody up or vice versa, that's not sustainable. At the end of the day, we have to be competitive. We have to be affordable, as to the point earlier, and more so now. Yeah. The idea behind the joint coalition at the end of the day is because we the United States don't have all the ships we need, don't have all the systems. We're a coalition because we need that coalition. I think that's a fair statement. And so anyway, back to the innovation. I think there are opportunities. Certain parts of electronics is one. In our case, we are working already with some companies on cyber in Japan, and that could basically transcend just the Japanese market, which was always our intent. I'm pretty sure my competitors are doing the same sort of thing. But at the end of the day, the thought that somehow the Japanese industry will have their fighter development program, their missile development program, their radar. I think in the long run, the more competitive and the more open it gets, the market forces will dominate. And as you know, we have our industrial base strategy, which hasn't been alluded to. We talked about defense exports, and we talked about the other regulatory issues.
Right.
I mean, so the next thing, once those things become mature, will have to be, so what are those sovereign requirements that I must have in Japan? And that will probably be something as the systems mature.
So let's talk a little bit about defense exports by Japan, because, you know, when you read the newspaper these days and they talk about the relaxation of the 3 principles, you gave us a very thoughtful presentation on the way in which thinking in Japan is evolving, right? But, you know, the headlines are all about Australia wanting to talk to you about submarines, and the United Kingdom wanting to talk to you about guidance systems, I believe. India wants to talk about seaplanes. So when I think about this new relaxation of restrictions in Japan, it sounds to me like you're getting more ready for exports than you're imagining a future of consortium participation. So that may just be my ignorance. But help me understand a little bit how you see that balancing act between joint development with the United States and creating these new arenas in which, you know, maybe someday Japan could be a competitor with the United States in the defense export market. Help me see the balance here in Japan.
That is also my question, or from the Japanese industry question, that the American companies may not want lifted ban of the arms export, because that will be potentially a competitor to the U.S. But I do not believe that we have more opportunities. But I would rather hear from Pat what the U.S. industry's opinion. And even that before that the changing that the arms export principle, as a Keidan then, proposed to change. But even that time, someone said, oh, that the changing the policy may U.S. industry might not want. That then changed. Still that someone said.
Yeah.
But my view is just we have more opportunity to collaborate with the U.S. industry, other countries also.
Just before we go to Pat, because I would like to hear your thoughts, Pat, as well, but do you have a sense of what Tokyo's priorities are in terms of defense exports? So, for example, I can think of, and I'm speaking out loud here, not from any insights, but I can think that the relationship with Australia for the Japanese government is an important security partnership. It's an evolving but increasingly important security partnership. So perhaps that conversation with Australia will start to take on a new priority because of the policy priority, right? Do you have a feel at the moment that Japan or the Japanese government has set out some priorities for guiding where, who, what kind of exports are most important to the government?
That will not be visualized yet. But I believe, this is just my opinion, that the jointly develop the submarine system for Australia would be a very, very good opportunity and good system. But you know that system level industry could not lead.
Right.
So that the government should lead the system. But maybe that as a supplier to the component, that could be possibly that we can export. But the system level, because this is not only selling the hardware, just including the training, maintenance, and the kind of capability building, so that how that the government will prioritize first. But to the submarine to the Australia would be a good opportunity for us, I believe.
Pat, would you like to comment on this joint development and defense export?
Sure.
Not trade-off, but tension.
Yeah, first let me just say that we welcome the opening. We welcome the ability to partner with MHI, KHI, Fujitsu, NEC. I mean, in fact, we have given a little bit away. We've already been in some dialogue with them as this was unfolding, and I think we've already got a series of opportunities that we, at least the very least, we know where we can go with them. And I'll say it I'll put it in context, Nishiyama-san. So first of all, we never shy from competition. I mean, that's a good thing. I think it keeps us on our toes, and it also kind of defines your market presence in some ways. But also it goes back to something I said earlier. We team with everyone. I mean, I think we may be slightly, different than the other defense primes, but I mean, our, BAE Systems is our largest partner on F-35, and I think we just determined that, we're going to actually increase British defense exports by 30% just by having them. That's a real amazing number, by the way. Yeah. And so, you think about our air defense systems with MBDA in Germany on MEADS, and I could keep on going. This is how we do business. And there are certainly markets where then I will compete with BAE and I will compete with MBDA. So I don't expect that the more mature the defense primes in Japan get, that we wouldn't see them in the marketplace. I personally think that for the first phase of whatever that time period is, 5 some years, maybe more, we'll be partnered together. And I see that as a positive thing. And we may be subcontractors as well. It may not just be Lockheed Martin or the other U.S. primes being your prime out there. I think you have some platforms, you have some other systems, and don't sell yourself short. It's you have more to offer, I think. And there is a maturity factor, I think, as well, but as in understanding the markets, but that will come. So.
You mentioned sort of time frames as we're looking out. None of this is going to happen tomorrow or the next day, right? This is going to be a process of years and maybe decades as this matures and develops. One of the points that Pat, you raised in your remarks was the need for human resources. And that's true, and I'm vice chair of CULCON, for those of you who don't know. It's a cultural educational advisory committee to the governments of Japan and the United States, and I'm on the US side. I'm also the executive board of the Bridging Foundation. Excellent. So thank you for mentioning that. But we need young Japanese engineers and American engineers to be working together. We need to train them to work together, not only to compete, but also to develop the technologies of the future. Nishiyama-san, can you speak a little bit to how you see that component going forward? Do you see opportunities for us to support the kind of educational, the human resource capacity that we're going to need to be really effective with each other in the future in the technology field?
I do not fully understand that
How do we train people?
In Japan?
In Japan and the United States in ways that...
If that the training or kind of OJT, right. That if there's some program that not be necessarily a big program, and the working together will be the good opportunity train each other. But just kind of training we have already have a license production. We have a technical assistant from US and trained in Japan. Right. That already happened.
Yeah. No, I understand. You've got excellent engineers and scientists in Japan. I was just thinking, as we look forward to support the way in which we're going to want to develop our defense technology together, there is some investment in the next generation of leaders in the field that we might want to think about as we think about this broader.
Can I make a comment, though? So, if you don't mind.
Yes, no, please do.
So I struggle, as part of my current remit, we have employees around the world. We have 3,000 and change in the UK and 1,000 in Canada, Australia, more and more in some of our other kind of key countries. And the challenge that what I present my internal human relations is, so if I am a young Japanese engineer, I just graduated from university, I'm 21 or 22 years old, how does the Lockheed Martin Corporation hire that person, train that person, and make that person work for, get that person to want to work for me and the corporation throughout their career and grow to the highest levels that we can provide that? That's our challenge. And I, truth be told, I honestly believe you will now, because of some of the changes here that we talked about in Japan's defense industry, defense policies, you now have the ability to take your best and your brightest and start them on a career and have them work in something vital to their nation. And I would say that was harder before. Not that it was impossible, but now this is something that could become both a growth, a national priority, international priority, and I just think that shouldn't be missed.
Maybe a future that we can conceive of MHI or any other large Japanese company hiring a young American engineer. So I'm very hopeful about that next generation of ours working a little bit more collaboratively. So let me stop here. We have time for a few questions. We've kept your attention, I think, long enough. So let me open the floor. There are microphones, and when you get a microphone, please make sure it's a question. But identify yourself and your institution. We have a few more minutes in the discussion about defense technology transfer. There's a hand up right there, and forgive me for pointing, but that's the only way I can. Please stand up, and then the microphone will come to you.
I'm Hiroki Takeuchi at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. My question is about coming from Mr. Doerr mentioned the supply chains of the F-35 and other products in Lockheed Martin. My question is to Mr. Nishiyama about how would the supply chain of Japanese product be like? So parts are all coming from Japanese producers, or parts are also coming from all over the world?
Thank you.
The question is that
how would a global supply chain be organized, and where would your parts be coming from, all over the world, or how would you think about your participation in a global supply chain?
I think that the supply becoming a supply chain, that if we have a contract, the inquiry and contract comes from the U.S. and other countries, just supply as a subcontractor. But I think it would be the same as the commercial type of the export process, but that will require the government approval.
Right.
That's the restriction, I think.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'm like the previous moderator. I'm shielding my eyes so I can see the rest of you. The gentleman right there. Yes, please, sir. Could you stand up and allow the mic to come to you?
John Hemmings, adjunct fellow from CSIS. Slightly loaded question to Nishiyama-san. What is the future of Japan's R&D development? What's the strategy going to be, given its shift into, I guess, the international markets, and also given changes in technology, the rapid shift of it, and how the commercial sector is beginning to almost overtake government-funded programs?
So the future of R&D funding in Japan, and largely private. If I understood you correctly, John, it's private sector budgets outpacing perhaps public. The strategy. What is the strategy for R&D?
Strategy of the R&D. In Japan, that the defense system development, all 100% invested from the government, and that won't be changed very much. The strategy, driving or finding the new area, that I hope that the new funding system would encourage to find a newer technology, but still that the basic technology area funded by private sector. So it won't be much changed, I don't think.
Do you want to speak to how do you see any R&D impact in terms of the way the U.S. and Japan might be thinking about how do we think about that as collectively for the alliance?
Well, there's one aspect that I think that is now open that wasn't before. And let's just say there was a variant of a system that we've worked on, and now that variant is open to the international marketplace. So there would be both technology development. I mean, obviously there are some things I think that are being contemplated. I don't want to go into them, but you could imagine that the Japanese government, I think that's really the key, is that the government would say, this is a technology or a technology thread or a domain that we're going to put money in, and either one of the primes would work on it, and we would bring money as well. That's different. I suspect there's a again, not to keep using the maturing factor, but as the companies become more market savvy,
Right.
In collaboration with the new export office, which again doesn't exist yet, but when it does, I think that'll be the next thing that they focus on, much like we do. In the old days when I was a young engineer, the U.S. government would actually approve our IRAD projects, and they would come in and score them. I think we've left that, but I understand there's actually some discussion where we kind of head back in that direction, so we align the government's requirements much more with the money that the defense primes invest. I think this is another step in the development of this new regime that we're talking about.
We may have time for maybe one more question, if I have any. The gentleman in the back there, right straight back there, right next to the lady with the mic.
Yes, Tom Simkin.
Could you put the mic a little closer, please? I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Sure.
There
How
you
about
go.
this?
Perfect. That's great.
I didn't want to overdo it.
That's great.
Tom Simkin, hi. Pat, you were alluded earlier to cybersecurity being an area where, as partners move forward, they have to be at the same level. As the relationship matures, do you see that also being an issue for supply chain security? And how do you think that's going to evolve?
Yeah, I do. In fact, it isn't as we go forward. It's right now. And obviously, as Japanese industry, assuming that they do start entering, I'll say, the global supply chain of all the defense primes, it will be an issue. It is an issue right now that will have to be addressed to some depth. And at the end of the day, your systems are only as good as your entry points, and essentially then, therefore, your exit points. And if you have essentially integrated systems, or you have companies that are sharing data, that has to be part of the protection scheme. It's not a new subject, but it now just gets extended because the industrial base just got extended. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, I see one more hand. Do we have time, Dan? Would you let us have one more question? Okay, great. All the way in the back, I see a hand, but I can't identify a face attached to the hand. It's Yuki. Hi, Yuki. I can see your hand, but not you. So please go ahead. Is there a mic for Yuki Tatsumi, please?
Hi, Sheila.
Hello.
Yuki Tatsumi from Stimson Center. Thank you both gentlemen for a great presentation. I have a specific question for Pat. With the DoD going into Defense Innovation Initiative, Better Buy and Power 3.0, very much focusing on innovation, reaching out to non-defense companies, how do you see potential for example, U.S. defense primes cooperation with a Japanese non-defense company? Just as an example, hypothetically.
So I think we've always, I would tell you that internal to the defense primes, we feel very innovative. I don't want to be defensive, but going to Silicon Valley to find your next coolest technology. I believe Admiral Harris just stood up here and said he was very comfortable with the technology and its capability set, and it came from companies like Lockheed Martin and Boeing and Raytheon. So we feel pretty good. And is there more innovation and better and more interesting and new technology out there? There is. And I would tell you though, not to try to compare, I think we do that now. And I'll just give you an example. It's in the press, but we made a deep investment a few years ago in something called quantum computing and a company called D-Wave in Canada. And that had, at the end of the day, it had nothing specifically targeted towards a defense or aerospace technology. But we saw the long-term capability. We actually saw it, obviously, through our lenses about where we could apply it. And we used the Lockheed Martin Emerging Technology Fund to invest in that company, and we have a relationship and we have capabilities that we're looking at. So I actually think that regime already exists, and we do, as that one example demonstrates, we do look now across all of the opportunity sets. So I would just, not to be defensive about it, but I feel pretty good that we have the capability to take those technologies on board. And I think, I don't think you're going to find a technology company that wants to be a defense contractor based on the federal acquisition regulations and export control and everything else. Yeah. So the chances are they will want to come to me and have me use their technology in the first place. And I think that avenue exists. So I feel pretty good about it, actually.
Thank you. defense technology cooperation is obviously a conversation that we're going to continue to have as Japan's thinking on these issues evolves, and as your regulatory frameworks surrounding the various issues we talked about, those also have to develop. And I'm sure that by the end of this year, we'll get a little better glimpse into your new acquisitions agency and how they want to proceed. But clearly, this is an opportunity for the alliance. It's not only, economies of, there's commercial opportunity clearly, and both of you have alluded to that, but there's also an important way in which we can leverage defense technology cooperation to make our alliance more effective and more efficient, and to reduce costs, to make our taxpayers a little happier about the way we manage the alliance. But I think the new partnerships that you talked about are also important partnerships for the United States and for Japan. And so I think there's a lot of exciting news, and we'll continue to talk about this over the years. Thank you both very much for excellent presentations. Thank you for your audience.
Nishiyama-san, it's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you.